Right, as you can see, it's a couple of weeks later and I put it together. It was not an easy thing to put together, especially if you have reduced hands. Also, for this section I have added a little bit more light, so hopefully there's less sensor noise. I did not follow the book completely because the book said to screw this circuit board in and then start soldering everything up, and that I don't think would have been the brightest way of doing it. To be honest, trying to solder these LEDs through these little holes, there's going to be a sort of smell of burning cardboard. But other than that, I don't see this being a pleasant first soldering or electronics kit. I don't see that people will want to come back to electronics after this. Right, so let's listen to it. I have it at the quietest, and it is incredibly loud. So, sounds like a square wave. We'll find out if it is in a minute. The octave button knocks it up an octave. The sharp stroke flat button does what it says on the tin. The tremolo is basic, and the envelope is equally basic. It's pretty simple. So open it up again and see whether it is a square wave. We should be able to work it out by looking at the speaker. Let's get me cheapy but perfectly usable for audio oscilloscope in. Use this leg of the LED as ground, and let us see what's coming out the speaker. You can't see that, so I'll move across. Yep, that's a square wave. To be honest, I really should have put it across the speaker, but meh. You could hear it, what it was anyway. It was being modulated by another pin as well for some of the effects, so it's an easy way of doing it. But it's a waste of this chip, really, because I got the data sheet and it's quite a nice chip. It's very PIC like the HT46 series. It can do quite a few things, and at 4 megahertz it's doing a million instructions, so very PIC like. It's just a reasonable microcontroller, which is cheap. As in, I found these on AliExpress for £11 for, sorry, not £11, 11 American dollars for 20. So cheap. And it does its job. But what do I think of this? I think it is a waste of potential. I mean, the fact that they drew all of these things on, and people may think that they're going to get something that can do more than it obviously can. The fact that the manual didn't explain exactly what the chip was doing. It didn't give the source code. Although I did find that programmers for that chip aren't the cheapest in the world. But even so, people could play with it. And they can't with the closed system like this. And the fact that you'll have to solder through a cardboard box and solder onto flat pads. If somebody was interested in electronics and they thought they'd get this as a way to see whether they actually wanted to do electronics, they would decide not to. So it's sad. The sound you get out of it is, as I said, one step up from a stylophone. If you don't know what a stylophone is, here is my stylophone. It's a bit dusty because it's not really something you use very often. And you play notes instead of by bridging these contacts here. You play it with a stylus. And you make the contact like that. And it is very temperamental, as you can see. But it isn't quite so temperamental if it doesn't have a machine of oxidization over the keys themselves. And it too has a vibrato. And I believe it is all done in an analog manner. Opening it would be too much for fuss, but I believe later ones did use a 555 timer, but early ones just used a transistor oscillator. And there isn't that much of a step difference here. If you're going to make a 1950s science fiction film, then this was the one you want. Because it is a synthesizer in the least strict sense, as in it does synthesize sounds, mainly by just creating a square wave on one pin of a microcontroller and then modulating it by another pin on the microcontroller. But it is synthesizing sounds. And the thing is, I think for, how much was this originally? £18. I think for that much, you could probably have come up with a basic, an incredibly basic, analog synthesizer in the same form factor, but the parts would be the majority of the cost, especially the knobs, because they aren't cheap, and analog synthesizers tend to have lots of them. But that's a project for another day. And now I've got to think of a use for this. I'm sure there must be one.
Do you think they'll come back, Professor?
I don't know, Mary. I just don't know.